gentlemen, welcome to the Extraordinary Family Life Podcast. We are your hosts, Greg and Rachel Denning. Today we're going to talk about where to begin making changes. Because, here's something I've been thinking about all week. And it's just like, you guys get it. I mean, I know you do. And I think other people do too. It's where you get an idea will just kind of, it gets in your head and it'll just kind of permeate and percolate and marinate. And it just, you spin it around. This idea has been in my head all week long. I wholeheartedly believe that every good person wants to be healthy and fit.
They definitely want to be free from disease and pain,
right?
If
Exactly.
Nothing else.
Right. They're like, well, I don't want to suffer.
They might say, no, I'm not sure I want to be healthy and fit, because to them they have some idea of what that means or looks like.
Right.
But at the very least, they want to be free from disease and pain.
Right. Which is healthy.
Right.
So they want to be healthy. And I think most people want to be fit as well. When you really get down to it, they want to be fit.
Meaning that they want to be able to live normal life and have fun and be able to do activities with the people they care about, those types of things, at the very least.
Right. Well, this is interesting.
Yes,
You're
is interesting.
You're advocating for these people that I don't know. Like anyone I talk to, they're like, yeah, I want to be healthy and fit.
Because I think that, at least in my experience and for some other people, that they might not resonate with what you're saying because they might think you have a different definition than what they would give it.
Right.
Because
okay,
I know...
Which I do. So when I talk about fitness for me, it's different. But I'm talking about fitness for others.
That's why I have to clarify.
When they would say, yeah, I would like to be fit.
Anyone who knows our story and how we disagreed about specifically health and fitness for years, decades, one of the challenges I had is that whenever you would say things like that, healthy and fit, I automatically thought the definition according to you.
Right.
Which meant here, which means I'll never achieve that, which means, I'm not sure I want to be healthy and fit because that means this. When I started giving it my own definition of what that means, which, I've just been doing, then suddenly it seemed more motivating, more desirable, more interesting to me, as opposed to something that was beyond my ability. So I guess that's why I'm redefining it here, or adding additional definitions, so that people are like, oh yeah, well yeah, I do want that. I want to be free from disease. I don't want to be old and crippled. I don't want to die from cancer at a young age like my father did.
Right. Or have limited functionality.
Yeah, same for me. I don't want to not be able to go hiking with you guys, or to not be able to do certain things because my body literally wears out and I can't do it.
Well, and that's even future forecasting. So, and we need to think that way. In fact, I was re-listening to a book by Brian Tracy this morning, and he said that they did this research years ago, and they found that the number one determining factor for success was long-term thinking.
Absolutely.
How do my decisions today affect my outcomes later on?
Well, Jordan Peterson did a similar study where he, in his college experience as a professor, he would have students do that type of experience. They simply wrote about what outcomes they would like to have in the immediate future and within 3 to 5 years, and that alone was enough to get them better outcomes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's transformative.
It is.
Man, and maybe that's relevant to today's conversation is, gosh, okay, we're going to give you, the question ultimately is like, and we'll get to the question, is like, where do I begin? Well,
and how do I not get overwhelmed?
One of them right there is like, begin with, what do I want long term? Like,
I want to change my life.
What are the outcomes I want?
Where do I start? What's step number one?
And we're going to give a lot of step number one there. But that could be overwhelming. We'll explain several elements. Circling back to where it begins, like the vast majority of people I've ever talked to, they want to be healthy and fit. Even if they define it differently, they want to be healthy and fit. They want healthy relationships. They want family relationships. Even those who think, no, I don't. On their deathbeds, that's what comes up. There's lots of research on this and lots of examples. But when you get to the end of your life, it's like, oh man, the things that matter most are those close relationships with family, right?
Besides the fact that, because yes, there is this trend going where, and we heard about this in Mongolia really recently, even because it's becoming a new thing in Mongolia of like, oh, what? I can spend my entire life single, and I don't have to have responsibilities or annoyances and irritations from other humans in my life. Like, I don't have to be married. I don't have to have children.
To level up and take on
Right. I
responsibility.
don't have to take on responsibility. Like, it's
live with somebody who calls me out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Points out my flaws.
Yep.
There's this awareness or this trend of that being a thing you can do. But the reality is that for most people, all people almost, if you don't have relationships taking up a majority of your life, there's a void. There's a vacuum. Because that's where most people spend their time and energy, is in relationships. And if you don't have that, what are you going to replace it with? Like, you literally have to replace it with something huge to fill that void, or otherwise there is just a void in your life.
And they're trying to fill it with entertainment and fun, and
which is not fulfilling.
Movies and friends
and I
and
would
drinking
say
and all kinds of stuff.
sometimes I think there are people called to a higher purpose, and they don't have time for the relationships because they are so engaged in some other purpose or calling or mission or whatever. And so that does fill it, but there's still that emptiness there because you're lacking any sort of meaningful, healthy relationships. So we can't just discount that as like, oh, well, wouldn't it be nice to not have those annoying relationships? The reality is that you need them. You need them in your life because without them, you literally have a void. And that's where a lot of, I think, in the most case of activists, they very often don't have relationships like that, and so they're trying to fill their void with something else, like being an activist for something, but it's just not the same.
Right.
So anyways, relationships.
So we want health and fitness. We want family relationships, marriage and relationships with our children, and we want secure, stable finances, or perhaps even financial freedom. Mm-hmm. So I guess going back, we want freedom from disease and suffering, physically and mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We want freedom from the suffering of broken marriages and broken relationships with our children. And we want freedom from financial strain and pain and hurt. Mm-hmm. So like we want to avoid the pain there, and we want to move towards the pleasure and well-being of being healthy and fit and having great relationships in our families and having financial success. Mm-hmm. So it's those three elements. And the vast majority of people, I would say, desire some definition of those three things.
Exactly.
And so when they're sitting there thinking about, like, I want to improve my life.
I want to change my life.
You get these bursts of motivation. It might be from a book or a podcast or a movie, something. They meet somebody like, yeah, let's do this, right? Mm-hmm. They want to get there. And I had a coaching client. As a couple, they went and met somebody who has this big, beautiful home with all this wealth and all this, at least outward success. I don't know about all the inward success. And that experience kind of ignited a fire for him. Like, well, we want some version of that in our future. And so we walked through that. So basically, that's where we're going today.
Right.
It's like, okay, I want to be healthy, fit. I want to have great relationships. I want to have financial success. I want to have this awesome life. Where do I begin?
Exactly. Especially when I feel like I am beginning, but then I get overwhelmed because I'm trying to do it all, and then I stop doing it because it's so overwhelming, and then I start again, and ultimately this isn't working because I keep stopping and starting. What do I actually do? Like, how do I actually make consistent progress in what things actually matter? And how do I stick to doing that?
I want to talk about something for a second. I don't, and maybe you'll have to help me remember here. I don't recall, at least vividly recall, being overwhelmed. I don't know if it's how I started training my brain to work early on. Because at 16, when I'm out on my own, like the suffering, the suck, was so motivating. I was so desperate and so driven. I just was devouring every book I could get my hands on. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I really leaned into personal development and professional development early on. And I was looking for tools for success. So even in my teens, 16, 17, 18, 19.
Well, and then until the time I met you.
I was still
20s,
going,
early
right.
20s.
So I had been just devouring all these books, and maybe that constant flow of great input helped create a framework where I just can't recall
Feeling overwhelmed by
feeling
the
overwhelmed,
process.
right? And where I'm like, because I hear it all the time. People are like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know. There's so much to do. I don't know what to do, and so they don't do anything. I'm sure I experienced that somewhere along, but I can't remember it.
Right.
And so I mean, I
think
get it. I
that's
understand it, but my mind has never gone like, oh, there's so much to do. I'm just not going to do anything.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting insight. I can definitely remember times feeling overwhelmed by trying to change all the things, especially. But there's a couple of things I want to unpack here. One, I think the times when making change is the least overwhelming is when you're in desperate circumstances. Like when the alternative is
Stuck in
something you
pain.
really, really don't want. Like the pain there is so strong that it doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels like freedom. It feels like you're pursuing freedom. Like I'm getting out of here. And so I think especially for you in your situation and circumstance, that was probably the case where you had these circumstances that you hated. You were alone, you were lonely, you were miserable, you were depressed, you had no family or friends. And so you wanted something different, and once you saw the vision of that being a possibility, you just went for it. And so there wasn't this sense of overwhelm because you're like, that's what I'm after.
It's like, hey, here's this list of things you need to do. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll do it.
I think that, at least I'm imagining, that the cases where we feel overwhelmed, it's kind of when we're going from good to better, or even great. But when you have situations and circumstances that are good and easy and comfortable,
Or okay.
sometimes okay, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like things are good, but you want to pursue something better. I feel like that's harder and can become more overwhelming because you're trying to change the habits that support that good lifestyle in order to create a better or greater lifestyle. And that's when it can be so much harder and so much overwhelming because you're not presented with making choices between like bad and evil and good. You're presented with choices like between I don't know if this is good or not and maybe a better option. You're presented with eating fast food because it's quick and easy, or you just got off work and you're tired and one, you want the fast food, or you have to go home and make a healthy meal for yourself. And so it's these choices that are seemingly in the moment not painful. Like if you have that fast food, it's not painful in the moment per se. Like it's meeting an immediate need. It tastes good. It's quick. It's easy. It's fast. It's convenient.
Expedient.
You're tired. You don't want to make a meal. It just seems like a good option. And so you think, it's just so overwhelming to think about having to go home. Well, first maybe I have to stop at the grocery store because I don't have any food. And then I have to go home and prepare it. I want to eat now. That can feel overwhelming, I think. I think it's scenarios like that where we get this sense of like, it's overwhelming to change my life because it's so much easier and more convenient to just do that convenient option. I think, at least for me, those are the times when I felt overwhelmed by making changes. I know like 100%, the one thing that did overwhelm me, because anyone who knows our story, my dad was diagnosed with cancer the week we met, and he passed away.
That you and I met.
He passed away a year after we were married, and that was a catalyst for us to pursue health and healthy diet and to study nutrition. But I do know that along that journey, and I feel great about where we are now, but along that journey, there were definitely times when I felt completely overwhelmed. I remember, and this wasn't just like one time, this was like maybe years. I would go into the grocery store and literally feel overwhelmed because everything I had been reading was contradicting everything else, contradicting each other, so that I felt that there was nothing in the grocery store that was healthy or good for me. Meat was bad, fruit was bad, processed foods were bad, high fructose corn syrup, seed oils, like everything was bad, or at least there was somebody out there saying, you've seen it on Instagram. Eggs are bad for you, oatmeal's bad, all these things. So I'm like, I don't even know what to buy. I don't even know what to eat.
So I wonder then, this is insightful. I wonder if, a key element of overwhelm is a lack of clarity.
Yes,
in,
yes,
in
yes.
precise action.
Absolutely.
So if there's any element of
Well,
confusion or lack of certainty or direction,
that's when overwhelm
feel
comes. And
overwhelmed.
I would say not just in a lack of clarity in action, but even more specifically, a lack of clarity in direction. A
Right.
lack of clarity in exactly the outcome
I
you're
think
trying to
is
achieve.
huge. A lack of clarity in direction and
Yes.
outcome. Like if you know exactly what you want, and then you learn exactly what you need to get what you want.
Yeah. And with along that, exactly what you don't want and what you can't do. Because I know for me, when it became easier to make choices around things when I fully understood how they directly impacted my desired outcomes. Fast food, for one example. Like, you and I have not eaten at a fast food restaurant for, like, I can't even remember the last time. I mean, maybe when we were engaged. That's how long it's been. We have not eaten at a fast food
wasn't
restaurant.
eating fast food back then.
I probably was. I don't know. So it's been 20 plus years
Right.
since I've eaten at a fast food restaurant. But the reason I was able to make that decision to not do that is because I was able to directly connect fast food to the undesired
There it is.
outcomes
Yep.
that I did not want. And in contrast to that, realized that not eating fast food is directly connected to the outcomes I do want. Like, for one thing, I've never been overweight. And that's not just because I'm lucky. And it's not because I exercise either, because we already know that I don't do that. It's directly connected to diet. I have been very deliberate about my diet, meaning what I will eat, what I won't eat,
And quantities.
and quantities. But I've been able to make it something that's easy and not overwhelming by getting clarity about what I actually want and the very specific steps that will get me there. And that really only comes because people, I'm sure, are saying, well, how do you do that? That, to me, comes when I do my research.
Yep.
When I do my research about the direct negative impact on your body from fast food, from seed oils, from high fructose corn syrup, from all these different things, then I'm like, oh, like, this is so clear. The research is here. This is what happens. And so that's clarity to me that then makes it easy for me to make those choices. Like, okay, I'm not doing that because, and I know people can say, well, it's so confusing. There's so many conflicting opinions out there. And that's true, but there's definitely a consensus. Like, I don't care how confused you might feel about things. We all know that eating Krispy Kreme or a Big Mac is not on the list of healthy living.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's certain common denominators that we all know are not going to be on the list. So that's where for me, that's where I started. Like, I remember one of the very first things I ever cut out was high fructose corn syrup. I just refused to buy any single thing that had high fructose corn syrup or any corn product in it. Yep. Like, that was just where I started. So it was one simple thing where I'm like, okay, I know this is bad.
And MSG, I remember that.
And MSG, yeah.
I remember specifically, like, okay, we'll just look at every ingredient. This was when we were very first married. Every ingredient list, if it had MSG or high fructose corn syrup, it's a no-go.
Yes.
And that's where we really
That's where we started.
Yeah.
That was the basic starting point. Now, here we are 20 years later, and there's a huge list of things, of ingredients we would not consume. But you don't necessarily have to start there. You start with one or two things that you're like, okay, I know that's bad. I'm not getting that. It's out.
I think a great short book that's very concise, very powerful is Why We Get Sick by Benjamin Bickman. I think everyone could start there. It's not a huge book. It's not super complicated. He just walks through, like, these are the things that make us very sick and lead to almost all disease.
I would actually say even shorter, one called The Dental Diet. It's by a dentist. But he talks about, his work is basically based off of Weston Price and Nourishing Traditions, and essentially connecting the health of your teeth to the health of your body and how that all plays in. But just, they emphasize kind of an ancestral diet or a traditional diet that was based on whole foods. So you do your research in an area like that, and we're talking about health and fitness first of all because in many ways so if we're talking about where do we start, where do we change our life, that is a great place to start
That's always my number one when people ask me where to start. Start with your mind, your body, and your brain.
Because especially when we're talking about I'm overwhelmed, I don't have enough energy to do what I want to do and to make all the changes I want to change. Well, one of the reasons is because you don't have the weight or the health and, energy levels that you need and want to be able to do all of this. Yeah. Like one of the reasons we have been able to accomplish all we've been able to accomplish is because we have so much energy. Yep. Because we've learned how to, first of all, eliminate toxins from our life. Yep. And second, then learn how to actually generate energy.
Exactly.
We're
not just lucky. We're not like, oh, we won the energy lottery, you lucky people. It's like we learned how to generate
Anyone
energy.
Can do this. Yeah. You just have to know what the key pieces are, what the ingredients are of generating energy. And one is not putting toxic stuff into your vehicle. Like just like with a car, if you want it to run well, you better not put in diesel if it's a gas vehicle, and you better not put in water, or vice versa, or water, garbage, right? You have to put the right stuff in. So that's a great place to start, because if you just don't have the energy to do it, and you've got extra weight, especially, reducing all of that and increasing your energy is going to help you in every other area of your life.
Yep. And everyone I've worked with, within a week, feels better. Feels more energized.
Of going on to your suggested diet.
I give some suggestions of very specific things to cut out and very specific things to start consuming. Mm-hmm. And without fail, so far, within a week, everyone's like, wow, I feel so much better. Mm-hmm. I mean, it takes a couple days of the body going, ooh, what's going on? I miss all my addictive substances and and I got a headache and I feel this and that and the other. But within a few days, they're all like, man, this feels good. I haven't felt like this for a long time. And if we hold that consistently, then it compounds in our favor, and we're just operating with massive amounts of energy. And the body is the filter and the vehicle through which we experience every single thing in life. Right. So no matter what we want to work on, improving our body improves the engagement in that other activity. So if I want to work on my marriage, one of the best things I can do is work on my body and brain. If I want to work on my relationship with my kids, one of the best things I can do is get my body right. So I want to go back to overwhelm, because this is fascinating. I think very important for people who want to start making a change. And I know there's people listening that are already in fantastic shape, or marriage is fantastic. But like wherever it is you want to make any kind of improvement, you can pick any aspect of your life. Like, I want to make improvements. I think one of the most common things we hear is the overwhelm. So first, like we clarified, it could be a lack of clarity on direction.
Well,
like, where am I going? I'm so confused. So I think I'm just so fascinated with this idea, and it comes up all the time. So I really want to understand it today. One of them, I think we're using the word overwhelm as kind of a blanket word for other things. And so they're like, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, let's take that layer back. Just use a different word. And then in some cases it might be like, well, I'm confused. Right? Confusion will do it. I'm not sure what to do. Or, well, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, peel that back. What are you feeling like? Well, I'm not sure what to do. That's different.
Wait, how is that different than confusion?
So
maybe you know what to do, but not sure how to do it?
Yes, like I want to go this direction. I want to get this result, and I don't know how to do it. Where I think the food thing is a good example. I'm confused because there's so many conflicting voices. There's 20 different people saying 20 different things. I'm confused. And the other one's like, I just don't know what to do.
So then,
so I go to the gym.
Food as
I walk in
an
the gym
example,
and I'm like,
what exercises do I do?
I don't even know how to use these machines. Like, yeah, what do I do?
Or the food thing, like once you realize, because it's true, that you need to be eating more red meat, then you're like, well, what do I actually make? Right? So then there's, I guess it's still another level of confusion, but it's like, okay, I know now what to do, but now how do I do it?
How do I do it? So I don't know
how
what to
do
do.
I actually do this in the day-to-day world?
Right. So there's that one, and then I think there's at least a third element of, okay, now I know what I want, and I have created a list of what I need to do, and wow, that's a big list. And it seems like so much. And so I feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I think that's another way we use that word, because we're looking at this long.
Like, in order to get healthy, I have to eliminate all these endocrine disruptors, and then I also have to eat all of these healthy foods that I don't know how to prepare. And
And
so
I have
it becomes
to
this
work
giant
out
list.
5 to 6 days a week,
Right.
and I have to do this exercise and that exercise. And so, the list starts getting long, and we're looking way out there. And here's where I see it pop up all the time. Instead of focusing on today, like today, I'm going to do a 30-minute workout. I'm get my heart rate up. I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to just move my body, and I'm going to come in. I'm going to eat something really good, and I'm not going to drink any soda today. What we start doing, the brain's like, you have to do this for the next
every day forever.
20 years. Exactly. Every day forever is what the brain
How
does.
am I going to do that?
Every day forever? Nah. Let's just stop and get a fizzy drink and some donuts, right? And just like throw it out because forever.
Exactly.
Especially because early on it seems so hard.
Yeah.
Like the
Donut or ground
overcoming
beef.
inertia to eat better and exercise. It's in the beginning, you're like, man, this is so much self-discipline, so much effort. It's like, this is so hard. I had to do this every day forever. Like,
well,
there we go. I feel
so-
overwhelmed again because it's so much effort. But after just a few days, it's so much easier to do. I got to quote Emerson. Oh, well, I don't want you to lose your thought. Go for it.
Just remind me, Atomic Habits.
Okay.
Go
Atomic
ahead.
Habits. So Ralph Waldo Emerson said, that which we persist in doing becomes easier to do. Not that the nature of the thing has changed, but our ability to do has increased.
Yes.
So what we keep doing gets easier to do. So if you keep working out, guess what? It's easier to work out. You keep eating healthy, it's easier. It just keeps getting easier and easier and easier. So then you look at people that have been doing it, and they're like, what? No, I don't even think about it anymore. It doesn't take any effort. I'm just doing it. And you're like, you're so lucky.
Right.
Well, no. It's just
you have so
just
much discipline.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you have so much control? And like, what are you talking about? Like, it doesn't, for me now, it takes no control to not eat donuts, fast food, junk food.
Right.
Like, none. I'm not sitting there like, you could do this, Greg. You could do this. Don't eat that crap. I'm like, there's zero. Like,
desire,
there's a
temptation.
whole tray of junk food, a buffet of garbage. Like, this happens every time we stay at a really nice hotel. And you go in their breakfast buffet. It's just, or anytime you go to church and they have refreshments or whatever, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a gigantic table of poison. I'm not looking at it thinking, wow, that looks so good. I got to resist it. Nothing. I walk right past, I take a big sniff, and I'm like, oh crap, I think I just got a cavity in my nose from that toxic poison. I'm going to go do I got to do a nasal detox from walking past the table.
I'm going to say that I am way better about that than I used to be, like, for sure. But there are still some times when I am tempted for sure. I'm like, oh, that thing? Okay, I am tempted by that. So for me, and this ties into the Atomic Habits I wanted to make, is that it's still not about discipline. It's not that I have a ton of discipline per se. I do have some discipline, but the key to success is strategies and systems, which is exactly what he talks about in Atomic Habits. When you set up your environment to succeed, then guess what? It's so easy to succeed, and it doesn't require a lot of discipline. Like, if you had to
make it easy.
rely just on discipline in order to make all of these changes, it's so hard. No wonder you get exhausted, and no wonder you feel overwhelmed, because you're trying to use discipline to make it happen, when instead what you have to do is use your habits, your systems to make it happen. So one easy thing for me, in order to keep this up, is going back to the food example, because it's a real tangible example. I just don't buy anything that tempts me that I shouldn't be eating.
Right.
Easy. We don't have donuts in the house. We rarely have bread in the house. We have some dark chocolate, but we eat that occasionally. Not a temptation. It's just like a little thing that's allowed. We don't have any of the, like, Oreos, nothing like that. We don't have any of that.
Sugars, no highly processed anything.
Yeah, there's nothing highly processed. There's nothing. Now, again, that's like the next level. That's where we've gotten to after 20 years. But starting out, We just didn't buy the stuff.
Right.
We didn't buy the ice cream.
So that's a cool idea. So you exercise discipline at the grocery
Yeah,
store
one
so
time.
that you don't have to exercise discipline all week.
Exactly.
You make it way easier for
Right.
yourself.
So much easier. Like, it's just that simple when you just cut it out. It's not there. So it's not a part of your daily routine. Now, going into the day-to-day world, that can get a little trickier, especially if you go to work and there's donuts there all the time or whatever. You have to get more strategic about having a system to help you. And in that case, that would just take you, going back to this feeling of overwhelm, you would just have to break that down. Well, when am I feeling tempted, and why, and how could I prevent that, and what could I buy instead to have to fulfill that need? When buy a donut peach instead. I don't know if they have them in the U.S., but in Europe they have what we call donut peaches because they're nice, flat, like a donut. They're delicious. That's a great replacement for a donut. That's way better than a donut, right? To eat a peach.
Yep.
So you just have to be strategic about what you are going to do instead to create a system that makes it easy for you to keep the commitments you made beforehand.
Right.
And I think that that's often where most people fail, is that they get inspired, they get excited, and then they sabotage themselves by doing the thing that makes it hard for them to keep that commitment that they wanted to make.
Well, think about it. If your pantry is full, you have a year's supply of trash.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's it. I'm changing. I'm not eating that junk anymore. And multiple times a day, you've got to walk past the pantry or go
open
into
it up
the
and-
pantry and exercise self-discipline to
Right.
not eat that garbage.
Yeah, that's just so hard and
Where
challenging.
on a day of motivation, you're like, that's it. I'm done. You walk in the pantry, you throw it all away.
Or give it to someone else.
No, don't kill other people. Like,
Give it to
what's wrong
a
with you?
food pantry.
Gosh. I mean, maybe give it to a pig or something.
Oh,
Ooh.
pigs are great.
Okay, but like you go in and you exercise when you're feeling motivated, on fire, and you're like, this is it, I'm becoming a new person. Get all of that crap out of your life. And then it's gone. And your
But
brain's
that's so
looking for it. You're
drastic,
searching.
Greg. It's so...
But that's...
And it's such a waste of money.
It is. But, like, would you rather suffer in poor health and keep the extra weight? No way. It's not worth it. And it is a waste of money, but choices have consequences. You bought that crap.
Well, and because for us, sometimes that drastic is just what you need. Because it also makes a major statement. It makes it easier for one thing. But it also makes a major statement to yourself and to the people around you that you're serious about this.
I'm done.
I am willing to waste, quote unquote, this money because that's how seriously I feel about making this change. And when you do something like that, then your brain's like, oh, okay, wow, yeah, we're really serious here.
Yep.
And so it adds this additional level of discipline in a way of like, like this is how firmly I feel about this. I was willing to do that drastic change.
Psychologically, you're doing yourself a huge favor.
Exactly, right.
For those of you who are like, I just can't do it. I can't throw away. It just is good money.
That's why I said
We'll
give
save
it to someone
for
else.
food
Donate
stores,
it to
whatever.
someone else.
Again, long-term thinking, you're like, well, no, if you eat all this crap and your family eats all this crap, there will be medical bills.
It's true.
There
And we
will be
often don't
you will
make
pay
that
for
connection.
That one way or another.
Right.
Like, we never go to the doctor. I mean, we have 7 children. There's 9 people. We wander all over the planet, take massive risks. Like, we live life.
Safe risks.
We never go to the doctor because we're so healthy, which is the natural state of the body.
Is
Okay,
too much. Rarely.
Yes. We very, very rarely when it's needed. Like, if you break a bone, like, please go to the doctor. Like, get that thing fixed.
So we have been to the doctor for those types of scenarios.
If you get a strange infection, I got a kidney infection once and a urinary
You
tract
went to
infection.
the doctor.
I went to the doctor. Of course, I'm going to the doctor. But like overall, the amount of times we have been to a doctor or a dentist is directly so rare.
So here's another thing that I think people don't fully comprehend. Like, if you invest more money into the food you're eating, you have to invest less in doctor and medical bills.
Yep.
Because your health is better over the long run.
Exactly.
It's an investment. And so if you, in this scenario we're talking about, if you get rid of that food that's no good, because now even people like Jordan Peterson are coming out and saying, oh, the food pyramid's a scam. Like, you should not be eating 7 to 10 servings of grains a day. Like,
No
that's
way.
not good for you.
Right.
So you decide to throw out all your wheat food storage or whatever it is because it's not good. That's an investment into your long-term health because now you're not tempted to eat it. And this is kind of, I know for some people on the extreme level here, but this is kind of what we're talking about, is these are the kind of actions you need to take once you realize and have done the research for yourself to know, oh, this isn't good for me. I'm going to eliminate it from my life. That's the easy answer, not having to use discipline to get it done.
So that's a really great place to start, I would say. The people asking this question, like, where do I begin? If it were me and I was, person, what if we call him? Clarence. Clarence comes in and is like, hey man, I want to change my life. And I'm eating all this junk food. I don't work, whatever, the whole scenario, right? And he's like, I want to change. One great place to start is elimination. Mm-hmm. Just go through your house.
Because it's
go through your pantry, go through let's get rid of anything and everything that's not a part of your ideal best self. Like where you're going, who you're becoming, the kind of life you want to live, anything that's in your way, gone. Just go through and like, it doesn't have to take a ton of time. It might seem a little painful in the moment when you literally take your trash can over the pantry and just dump all the stuff in there and take it out to the trash. Like whatever, like dump all the alcohol down the drain. Like any tobacco products just in the garbage can. Like all your so-called energy drinks, your just massive caffeine sugar drinks, like all that crap gone.
Because
it seems extreme, but it's a great place to start.
Yeah, it's often easier to start making changes by focusing on what we know we don't want. Right? So it's focusing on the elimination. That's a good place to start because you're like, okay, I know I don't want this or I shouldn't have this. So then the next natural step is just to eliminate it from your life. Now, people don't do that partly because, one, it's challenging. Two, it feels like a waste of money. Three, though, which this is not then the next key step, you need to have some sort of replacement.
Absolutely.
So if you stop eating this or stop drinking that, you need to have something that you replace it with. Or otherwise, you're just going to be like, now I have this void in my life.
Your brain will freak out.
Yeah.
You're like, we're going to starve to death.
There's nothing to eat now. Exactly. What do I do?
What am I going to eat?
Yeah.
It literally starts freaking out. And people will get, like, so what am I going to eat? I don't know what to eat now.
Yeah. So there are a couple of ways to approach this. Obviously, the one that you mentioned, which is the extreme, but it definitely works. And then when you come to that point of like, I used to eat my Oreos, now what do? You use that energy in that moment to find a solution. Like, what can I eat instead that's better than Oreos? Right. And even if it's something like, and I'll even use this. I mean, it's not ideal per se, but if you find a way to make your own Oreos out of healthier ingredients, that's a step up than where you were, and sometimes people need that. I know. But sometimes people need that. They just need to kind of level up and get, well, here's why. Because I've been there, that's where the overwhelm can come. Because you often feel like you're jumping from here to here, and you don't know how to get there because you don't know the steps.
And so I had a client yesterday. I said, hey man, because, okay, this is a perfect example. He's like, look, I want to get jacked.
Big muscles.
Yeah. Well, and I was like, okay, you want to do that? And he's like, wait a minute. We had this conversation. He's like, I think my jacked and your jacked are different.
Okay.
I'm like, well, let's do yours. What do you want to do? And he started. I'm like, okay, you just want to be lean. He's like, ooh, I like lean. Lean's the better word. I'm like, great. Okay, well, let's go with lean. And we walked through that, and he said, and I said, look, man, these are the kind of workouts you be doing. And he said, I'm not ready for that. And I stopped him right there. I'm like, whoa, ho. Because if we allow ourselves this cop-out and we say, I'm not ready for that, that's just an excuse. It's just the brain resisting. It's the survival mechanism, whatever. It's just playing the victim somehow. It's like, hey, you need to do hard workouts. I'm not ready for that. What do you mean you're not ready for that? Do a hard workout. No, man, and this applies across the board. Like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. No, I'm not ready for that. What does that even mean? When you say to yourself, I'm not ready for that, what does that even mean? It's just like some buffer, you're using this phrase to protect yourself from effort, to like shield yourself from making the change. And like, you're not doing yourself a favor. If there's something I need to do to get new results, the worst thing I do is say to myself, I'm not ready for that.
Well, I think especially if you really do want the results, but then you're not willing to do what it takes to get them, it is a form of self-sabotage for sure. But I do also want to add that you're right, but I do feel that it's also a very masculine approach that women also need, but because of what we've talked about with hormones and changing cycles and all of that before in our other episodes, that doesn't work for a woman every single week, if that makes sense.
Yep.
You know,
That does make
there
sense.
are some weeks, and I think that this is often where women get into trouble. Because I was talking to one of my coaching clients about this. When we try to hold ourselves to that level of standard, like you were just discussing, of like, I just have to do it. I just have to level up. I just have to be ready to take on the challenge. There are weeks when I can do that, and there are weeks if I try to do that, I end up in a puddle of tears on the floor. And so on those weeks, I have to give myself more grace and be like, you know what, this week, I'm just doing whatever I can do.
Let's walk through that. That's specifically referring to like maybe massive effort, right? Where you're like, I got to put in a lot of effort here. But you're not talking about like, you know, on this week, I just feel like eating fast food, and so I'm going to.
Okay, yeah, but no, you're right. So
you're not like,
yeah,
hey,
I'm not like, oh, this is my fast food week.
I am definitely, yeah,
but
exactly.
I do have, and this is where it can get, there's a lot of nuance there, because I do have a carb week where I eat more carbs, which is generally the week before leading up to my period. I crave them more. My body, I did the research, your body actually needs more carbohydrates for creating progesterone instead of estrogen. So I do have what in other weeks I would consider ideal eating.
Yep.
During those weeks, I'm okay with it.
Right.
I eat more bread, although ideally I should be eating more
or junk food.
Yeah, it's still bread, generally bread and potatoes and squash, like more fruit. Yeah. So I'm eating more carbohydrates during those weeks, which on another week, I try not to eat as much of those things. I'm focusing on meat and proteins and fats.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, there is a time and place for that, and for men it's probably more consistent. But in this whole process, for women, we need to realize that we do have to allow ourselves these, I guess we could call them off weeks, where we can lower the standard. It doesn't mean we let the standard go 100%, or maybe we even just have a different standard. It's like, that's the standard for that week.
I would agree with that, because you don't want to lower your standards.
And just throw it out.
Because what you're doing, every time we lower a standard or make an excuse, it weakens.
It's making it harder for us in the long term.
So for women, I would agree that there's a week where you're like, this week is a different operating system.
Right.
We have a different principles and practices during this week. Not like, this is my standard, I'm lowering my standard. Right. Like that's a different ballgame.
No, that's true.
I want to circle back to this thing of, just to make sure I'm not misunderstood here. When say, well, I'm just not ready for that, I'm not ready for that. You might be like saying, well, no, I'm out of shape, man. I can't do 500
push-ups.
Yeah, 500 push-ups every day. What are you talking about? You're like, you're right. I'm not talking about that. And I'm not talking about you pushing yourself like some UFC fighter, because you aren't ready for that. What I am saying is like, no, you could do a hard workout today. Mm-hmm. Like, that's hard for you. You can push your limit today. There's literally nothing stopping you.
So essentially it's that. It's you can push your limit today.
Right.
And that's really all that it is.
But in our minds, we put up this block like, no, I'm not ready for that. Like, 100%, bro. If we were together, we could do this. And afterwards, you would feel amazing. You'd feel so confident and so triumphant that you did that. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, bro, you're ready. The only thing stopping you from being ready is the fact that you're saying you're not ready.
Yeah, it's a mental block. Okay, so I want to touch on some other topics here and approaches, because I know that we're talking about where do I start? How do I change? And we've been talking mostly about health and fitness, which is good because it is a foundational area for change. But I also want to tie it into this principle that in essence, when you are wanting to make changes to your life, one of the principles that we've always used is to look at what is the one thing or maybe two things that if I changed those, it would drastically change everything else in my life or have a positive impact on everything else in my life. So we've been talking about health and fitness because that is one of them. But I think another key, probably if I could pick two, it would definitely be marriage and money. Those would be two other areas where you could focus on making changes that would also have a major impact on all the other areas of your life. And so this is another strategy that when you're like, where do I start? What do I change? You have to look at what the biggest pain points are in your life. That ultimately, I think, decides where you begin. Because every person is different and every person is, we might be headed in a same general direction of where we want to go, but we're all starting from different places. And so we have to look at the pain points we have in our life. What's causing the most pain, the most frustration, the most irritation? And that is a place that you're going to want to begin to focus on. And rather than having this approach of doing all the things, if you have to choose, which I think it's wiser to choose, especially in the beginning, you focus on the pain points and start making changes in those areas, and they're going to have a carryover effect, overflow effect into the other areas of your life that will naturally be improved as a result.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if you can remove pain
and frustration and irritation.
So the other day I had a shoulder injury, and the pain in my shoulder, it was so distracting. It was even hard to hold a conversation. It was hard to think about other things, work on things, because the pain was just so intense. And so it was blinding, it was distracting, like it just pulled my attention away. Like it was crazy. So it makes sense. It's like, well, what's really hurting in your life right now? Give that the attention it needs. And once the pain is relieved in that area, here's a mistake I see people make a lot, and I did this too, is like we get some relief, and then we stop doing what was working, right? Like we do something to relieve the pain gets relieved, like, okay, now I can go back to what I was doing.
Exactly.
Well, what you were doing causes the pain. So within a few days or weeks, pain's back.
Yeah.
You're like, knucklehead. And so we get on this cycle of like, do something till the pain goes away, then stop, pain comes back. Do something, we just up and down, up and down, up and down. So you lean into that, relieve the pain, and keep going, and then you add something else. Like, what's the next thing that hurts?
Okay,
and
yeah,
how do we stack a little bit there so we can really make forward momentum?
That's the next level of this strategy, because you pick one or two things that are the pain points, you work on improving them, then once you get the relief, you don't stop, right? Because you've got to keep going. If you want the long-term relief, you have to keep doing the thing that brings that relief. But then there's a period of time where when you do that, it just becomes natural. Like it just becomes natural for you to now do that thing, like to not eat fast food. That's just so natural for us now. It's not even an issue. Once something like that becomes natural, then you're right. And maybe not once, but once it's becoming more natural for you, then you can pick another thing that's another pain point and use the same process of saying, okay, I'm going to work on this now. This is going to be my focus while I'm maintaining this other one over here. Because the problem, like you've said, that we see people doing all the time is they do this thing, they get the relief, and then they're like, great, now I'm going to move on to this. And they let that go.
And pain comes right back.
While they focus over here, and then now they're back in overwhelm because this problem came back up. There is a way to discover and figure out what helps you maintain that so that now this is just a standard. This is just your new norm. This is just a foundation.
From here on out.
From here on out, it's just the thing.
I think it's important to point out that people are capable, and I don't want to, like those of you listening, I want to talk to you specifically. You are capable of far more than you probably think you are, and far more than you're doing. And not that you're like, are you kidding me? I'm exhausted. I'm in survival mode. I'm just barely hanging on. And what I want to say is like your capabilities actually make that easier. And with the right tools and strategies, and especially coaching, one of the first things maybe you should do is hire coaching. Like join the programs. Ladies join the 28-day Rachel's 28-day challenge, and men get in the Formidable Family Man Masterclass and Tribe. Like get in there and get help and support and tools, tactics, strategies. but you're capable of so much more. And if you just kind of tap into your capacities and your capabilities, what's crazy is you'll look back and be like, oh man, like I was struggling so much, but needlessly, because I am capable of so much more. So you tap into those capabilities, and you're doing so much more, and you're stacking
with less effort.
With less effort.
Right.
So you're gonna do far more with less effort.
Well,
but it just takes starting.
I always think of when we were first married. First of all, when we were first married, we thought we were so busy. And then we adopted our first child, and then we thought, oh my gosh, we're so busy. And now, I mean, we do more now than we could have ever thought was possible to do in one day than we used to think was possible to do in a year. But it's because we have become more capable at being able to handle more and to do more with less stress. Because we have more energy, we have more vitality, we have more clarity, we have more strategy. When you dial in all of those pieces, then yes, you actually are able to do in less amount of time, with less effort, with less stress, so that it really does become so much easier to do all of the things, but not because you're putting out like mountains of energy to do it. And I think one of the keys to doing this is because ultimately it's all about energy in lots of different ways. And so many of us are using huge amounts of energy in resisting, or, well, I want to use resisting again, being resistant to certain things, like even what you were just talking about. Like, I'm not ready for that. Like, we put so much energy into that, resisting that thing, rather than just leaning in and putting our energy into it and then realizing, oh, actually, this is easier. Like I've talked about in all of our sex podcasts. Like, I used to put so much energy in avoiding sex instead of way more than it took to just actually have sex. And once I leaned into just engaging in sex with you more often, then it made everything else better, which then made our whole life better. So we're inadvertently doing all of these things that are actually making things more difficult for us instead of leaning into them and then receiving all the positive benefits that overflow as a result. So I think that's one idea of how we're sabotaging ourselves, because we need to just eliminate those things that are causing resistance in our life.
A very interesting one is how much energy and effort we put into excuses. Like, we really put all kinds of creative thought and ingenuity.
Right.
I mean, we're putting all this.
I can't do this because of all these reasons. And you're
it's
like, well, why don't you figure out how you can do it instead?
Take all that genius and creativity and move it to finding solutions instead of finding excuses.
Yeah, it's this whole idea of a lot of times we know already. We already know. We're like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be eating that, and I shouldn't be doing this, and I shouldn't be doing that. And yet we have all this energy and resistance into defending our position about why we are so right about this thing, and why we have the right to do it, and why we should be able to do it, and why it's good for us to do it, and why we're the exception, or whatever, on and on and on. When if we instead just admitted to ourselves, yeah, that's not, I don't need that in my life, I just need to let it go, then suddenly it's like you find this beautiful space where it's like all of those things flow to you and all of the unnecessary flows out, and everything's so much easier. And now you're able to do all the things that you want to do with more peace and joy and less overwhelm, and it's just a beautiful place to be in.
Love it. Okay, so kind of just to recap and give you some things to work on, just pick something that needs attention. Pick something that's
the pain point, the frustration point.
I know a lot of people come to us and their houses are very cluttered.
That's another
area. Their lives are very cluttered.
Well, because a cluttered house is a reflection of a cluttered mind, essentially.
Exactly.
If you find yourself surrounded by clutter all the time, it's because you haven't worked on yet organizing, and we don't think that this is connected, but it is. When you work on organizing your mind and vice versa, organizing your space, they help to organize each other. Organizing your space helps you to organize your mind, and organizing your mind helps you to organize your space.
Exactly.
So a cluttered space, to me, is areas that haven't been addressed, things that haven't been fully taken care of. And when we do that process, Because a lot of times it seems unimportant. Like, oh, we don't need to do that. I'm too busy. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Which can be good things. But I found that we can often find that next level of progress, that next level of growth, when we take the time to clean up the clutter that we've kind of been ignoring, if that makes sense.
Yep. And so there's two approaches. Of one, you could set aside a day and just do a massive effort towards that thing. So with the cluttering example, you could just say, you know what, this day we're going all hands on deck here, the whole family, and we are going to organize and clean up an entire space. Ooh, you could do that.
I think it's good to start with one space,
Yep.
not like
Pick a
the
space.
whole house.
You can do a lot. You can get a lot done. Another strategy that works just as well is every day you just pick part of it. And I'm going to circle back to this overwhelm thing, because I think I can conceptualize how this would happen. It's like you look at this clutter everywhere and you're like, ugh, it is so overwhelming. There's clutter everywhere. And the way I handle this mentally whenever there's something that seems like there's so much to do is I just say, well, what's next? What's first? What am I going to do here? I'm just going to take a chunk of this. I guess
Well,
I'll give a super simple, kind of almost trivial example. We purchased this property, and when we got here, it had been neglected
Here in
for
Portugal,
years. In
where we are
Portugal.
now.
So we're at the, we call it the World School Family Resort, and it had been neglected for so long. And when we got here, like the entire yard is just weeds. There was no grass. It was just all weeds. So I just started by watering it and planting grass seed and just kind of letting the weeds and the seeds grow together to at least cover the ground. So then, once it's green from the watering system, and again, I just had to do it one step at a time, right? I'm like, well, let's get some water on it. Let's throw down some seed. Now it's just like, well, it's way, it was just barren, nasty, horrible dirt. You couldn't even walk across it because you were just getting tons of burrs in your feet. It was just terrible. So now it's this combination of grass and weeds. And if I want to get rid of all the weeds, and I'm totally against like the chemical sprays. It's a fundamental that fits with this conversation. Is like keeping toxins out of your life. Like I'm not going to use those toxins. So we're going to get rid of the weeds. Now, I could go out there and I could allow my brain to feel overwhelmed by all the weeds in the yard. But instead, while I'm listening to books in the morning and evenings, I go
And
out.
letting your dogs run around.
Yeah, and I do some training with the dogs, or let the dogs out and play. And it actually turns in, I love this, all of our birds and pigs love eating the
Geese,
weeds.
chickens, and ducks.
I mean, they love it. So now they've gotten this routine. Every single morning they're out there waiting for me in the same spot, and every evening they just want their weed feed. They want to be fed. And so it's actually this beautiful thing where I go out, I'm listening to the book, I'm playing with my dogs, I pull probably a couple hundred weeds a day, and it's just little by little, it's getting better. So the yard's starting to look better. The grass is getting stronger and coming in, and within a couple of months, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. The whole area is going to be just gorgeous, but it's not getting overwhelmed by, oh my goodness, there's tens of thousands of weeds out here, the whole place, I can't do it. It's like, oh, okay, every day I'll make it a little bit better. And same thing with whatever you want to work on. That's how I mentally do it. I hope this is helpful for somebody. When I have this huge project or this huge list of things I need to do, like, okay, what's right in front of me? What can I do right now? I'll do that.
Well, and that to me is also the approach I take with decluttering, because same thing. People can look at a space and feel overwhelmed because there's so much stuff there and they don't know what to do with it. And really, decluttering and organizing just comes down to one thing at a time. It really is just that. You pick one thing. It can be anything. And you pick it and you say, where does this go? And then you find a spot. Now, people get stuck because they're like, I don't know where this goes, and then they just give up. I don't do that. I literally will hold on to that thing until I know where it goes, and then I'll take it there. And
So be careful what you pick up. You might be holding it all day.
Yeah.
You might have to take it to bed with you.
Well, but I will also realize if it's multi-step, then I come up with a plan for that. If it's something that I'm like, well, wow, really what we need is a place to keep the tools. Yep. So this is a tool. We need a place to keep them. I'm not to that step yet, so I'm going to have a tool pile. I make a pile of tools that will then later be organized
In a cabinet
when
that you
I
purchase.
purchase a cabinet
Yep,
or whatever.
exactly.
So, but what I do is I categorize things. So I take it and I put it into a category, and then everything that goes into that category goes together. So I start to separate out the mess so that you're bringing order to the space, right? And then things that I do know, this goes in the garbage, easy. This goes in the kitchen, I put it in the kitchen. It's really one thing at a time is the key to decluttering. And that same principle, I think, is true in this topic we're discussing today. Ultimately, when people are saying, how do I change my life? We could compare that to a messy house or to a cluttered room. It's the same principle. You just start with one thing. Like, what is right in front of you? What is sitting on your desk? What is, you keep walking across it every time you go. That's where you start. And then you pick that thing up and you say, where does this go? Yep. And you find a place for it and you put it there. And if you don't have a place for it yet, you put it in a pile so that you can get something to put it in. And you just go thing by thing, step by step, weed by weed, and that's ultimately how you make change. It really is that simple. One little thing at a time.
And it works in business. I mean, well, where we started, it works in fitness, it works in family, and it works in finances.
Yeah.
You can take these practices and principles wherever. It's like, what's going to make the biggest difference? What do I need to do today that can start moving in that direction? That's the way to get started. I would give this big encouragement. It's like, just do something today and each day. So every day when you get up, like, what's one thing I can do to move towards the direction of our ideal lifestyle, like the goals and dreams you want to have.
And if we want to talk about the intangibles a little bit more, because you can do this same process as you do with a room, but as you go throughout your day, you just confront all the things that are in front of you. And, maybe it's your morning routine, or maybe it's what you go to eat for breakfast. And in order to avoid the overwhelm, I might be sitting there and be like, wow, the only thing I have for breakfast is a bagel, and all I have is a donut for breakfast, right? And maybe in that moment I eat the donut, but what I'm not going to do is just be like, oh well, it's too hard, I can't do it. I will sit there and think while I eat that donut, how can I prevent this from happening again? What can I do instead? Like, what can I do today that will prevent me from eating a donut tomorrow? And so it's as you are confronted with the challenges you're facing, whatever they are, instead of discounting it and dismissing it and feeling guilty or shameful, like, I'm eating a donut again, just say, what can I do to change this? What can I do to make this not happen again? And then take action on that, one simple next step action to make that a reality.
And even with something as like big and complex as marriage, let's say maybe your marriage is feeling flat or it's struggling. You feel like roommates or you're fighting like crazy. And so you're listening to this podcast and be like, what could I possibly do today to this? Our marriage has been hurting for a while, and it's a big deal. It's like I can't just do one thing. But the truth is, you can do one thing. Like, you can sit down right now and be like, okay, my marriage is hurting. What's one thing I can do today that would move us in the right direction? And for me, just thinking out loud right now, if I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, I'm going to purchase a book on marriage, and I'm going to commit to listening to 30 minutes a day, right? Because my marriage matters, and I'm going to give it at least 30 minutes a day, because that's going to give me, just reading through the book is going to change my thoughts, it's going to give me ideas, it's going to remind me of things. But then right now, I'm like, what's one thing I can do? Well, I'm going to write a nice letter. I'm going to write a nice note, because Rachel loves notes. And so I'd be like, I'm ordering a book, committing to 30 minutes a day, I'm writing her a note right now. And I write her a note about something I appreciate.
I love what one of our clients said in our coaching session for the 28-day challenge. She said she's been working on this process, and she talked about how she's like, I don't know what to do yet that's different from what I have been doing, but the thing I'm doing in between is just remaining silent. I used to respond in a certain way, and that's obviously not working. But instead of continuing to do that same thing that's not working and not getting the results you want, she's now just being silent and saying, okay, I'm not going to respond like that.
She's thinking about
what could I do differently. And when her husband asks, she's just honest about it. Like, well, I know what I've been doing doesn't work, and I'm not sure what else to do, so right now I'm just being quiet about it, right? That's a simple step.
Yep.
You know, that I think is a perfect example of how we do this process. Whatever it is in life, whether it's marriage or food or exercise or parenting or money.